Welcome back to the VybeShift Podcast. This week we've been exploring a question that, on the surface, sounds surprisingly simple. I don't know what deserves my attention anymore. At first, that sounds like a problem of priorities, perhaps even a problem of time management. But as we've journeyed together this week, I wonder if you've begun to notice something else. Maybe the problem isn't that you don't know what deserves your attention. Maybe the problem is that your attention no longer feels like it belongs to you. Just sit with that for a moment. Your attention, not your schedule, not your responsibilities, not your calendar, your attention. Where is it? Who decides where it goes? What claims it before you've consciously chosen? Because if we were to look honestly at many of our days, we might discover something surprising. We wake up, and before we're fully awakened to ourselves, something else already has our attention. A notification, an email, a text message, a meeting, a deadline, a problem, a responsibility. The mind immediately begins moving. Planning, calculating, remembering, preparing, responding. The day begins. And without even making a conscious decision, our attention has already been given away. Not intentionally, not carelessly, simply habitually. Then something fascinating happens. The rest of the day unfolds in much the same way. One responsibility hands us to the next. One conversation hands us to another. One task gives way to another task. One concern becomes another concern. Hour after hour, our attention is continually transferred from one thing to another. By evening, we're exhausted, not simply because we've worked hard, but because our attention has spent the entire day belonging to everything except ourselves. I wonder how often we've mistaken that exhaustion for the normal experience of being an adult. Because many of us have lived this way for so long that we no longer question it. We simply assume this is life. This is what responsible people do. This is what successful people do. This is what productive people do. And yet, there's another question quietly waiting beneath all of that. What if responsibility was never meant to require the surrender of your entire inner life? That question has been sitting with me all week, because I don't believe the greatest cost of modern life is that we're busy. Human beings have always worked. Human beings have always carried responsibility. Human beings have always faced uncertainty. The greatest cost may be something far more subtle. We have become so accustomed to responding to life that we gradually stopped experiencing it. There's a profound difference between the two ways of living. Responding is necessary. Experiencing is essential. Responding allows us to function. Experiencing allows us to feel alive. Somewhere along the journey, many of us became exceptionally good at functioning. We learned how to organize, how to produce, how to solve, how to anticipate, how to optimize, how to carry more, how to endure more, how to accomplish more. And in becoming so capable, we slowly lost contact with another capacity. The capacity to simply be present with our own lives. Think about yesterday. Not what you accomplished, not what you checked off, not what you completed. Can you remember a moment when you were completely there? A moment where your attention wasn't divided? When you weren't already thinking about the next thing? When you weren't rehearsing tomorrow, replaying yesterday, managing 5 invisible responsibilities in the background? Just one moment. For many people, that question is surprisingly difficult to answer. Not because they don't want these moments, but because those moments have quietly become rare. We have become experts at moving through life while our attention is somewhere else. We eat while thinking about work. We work while thinking about home. We drive while thinking about meetings. We sit with the people we love while thinking about unfinished tasks. Even our vacations often become planning sessions for what awaits us when we return. Our bodies arrive, our attention often does not. And here's the realization that has continued unfolding for me throughout this week. We don't actually experience life where our bodies are. We experience life where our attention is. Read that again. We don't experience life where our bodies are. We experience life where our attention is. Which means a person can be sitting beside the ocean while mentally answering emails. A parent can be playing with their child while mentally solving tomorrow's problems. A leader can be in a meeting while mentally worrying about another meeting that hasn't even begun. Physically present, attentively absent. Perhaps that is why many people reach the end of the day with a strange feeling they cannot explain. The day happened, but somehow they weren't fully there for it. And when enough days pass like that, people begin saying something that sounds remarkably similar. I don't know what matters anymore. Perhaps what they're really saying is something even deeper. I haven't been living where my life has actually been happening. And that may be where our journey begins. The invisible shift. I wonder if you've ever noticed that life rarely changes all at once. It changes one ordinary day at a time. One responsibility becomes two. Two becomes five. Five becomes 10. None of them seem particularly significant on their own. They're simply the things responsible people do. You answer the email. You return the phone call. You pay the bill. You attend the meeting. You schedule the appointment. You solve the problem. You help the person who needs you. Then tomorrow arrives and you do it again and again and again. If someone had shown you your life 20 years ago and said one day your mind will almost never be quiet, you probably wouldn't have believed them. Not because you lacked ambition, but because that's not what your imagined success would look like. Most of us imagined that if we worked hard enough, eventually life would become more spacious, more peaceful, more enjoyable. We imagined arriving. Yet for many people, the opposite has happened. The more successful they've become, the more their attention has become fragmented. The more responsibilities they've accepted, the more difficult it has become to be fully present anymore. This is one of the quiet paradoxes of achievement. Achievement often expands our opportunities, but it also expands the number of things asking for our attention. At first, that feels exciting. Then it becomes demanding. Eventually, it becomes normal. And that's the dangerous part. Not because responsibility is dangerous, but because adaptation is. Human beings have an extraordinary ability to adapt. We adapt to noise. We adapt to pressure. We adapt to stress. We adapt to constantly thinking about the next thing. Eventually, what was once exhausting becomes familiar. And because it becomes familiar, we stop questioning it. We stop asking whether that is actually how life is supposed to feel. Instead, we simply tell ourselves, this is adulthood. This is leadership. This is success. This is responsibility. But what if we've confused responsibility with constant mental occupation? What if those aren't the same thing? Because responsibility asks us to respond when something requires our attention. Constant mental occupation asks us to carry everything all at once, all the time. There is a profound difference. Think about someone carrying a heavy backpack. If they carry it for 5 minutes, they notice the weight. If they carry it for 5 hours, they become tired. If they carry it every day for years, something interesting happens. They stop noticing the backpack. Not because it isn't heavy, but because it has become familiar. I wonder how many of us are carrying an invisible backpack filled with unfinished thoughts, unmade decisions, future worries, old expectations, unresolved conversations, questions that have no immediate answers, responsibilities that haven't even arrived yet. We carry them everywhere, to work, to dinner, on vacation, into our relationships, into our sleep. And then we wonder why rest doesn't feel restorative anymore. Perhaps it's because our bodies stopped working, but our attention never does. Maybe that's why a weekend sometimes doesn't feel like rest. It simply becomes a different kind of responsibility. We tell ourselves, I'll finally catch up. I'll get ahead. I'll organize everything. I'll clean. I'll prepare for Monday. Notice how quickly even rest becomes another project, another transaction, another opportunity to accomplish something. And while accomplishment has its place, something subtle begins to disappear. The experience of simply inhabiting the moment. Have you ever noticed how difficult it has become to just do one thing? To eat without checking your phone, to listen without preparing your response, to walk without planning tomorrow, to sit in silence without reaching for stimulation. This isn't a criticism, it's an observation. Because I think many of us have unknowingly trained our attention to believe that it must always be somewhere else other than where life is actually happening. We have become experts at preparing for life, managing life, optimizing life, improving life, but somewhere along the way we quietly stopped experiencing it. And perhaps that's why so many people describe themselves as feeling disconnected. Not disconnected from other people, disconnected from themselves. Because when your attention is always somewhere else, you slowly lose contact with a place where your own life is unfolding. Not in tomorrow, not in the next achievement, not after one more responsibility is completed, right here, this moment, the only place your life has ever actually happened. Coming home to your own life. As we've journeyed together this week, we've explored 3 different experiences. On Monday, we recognized what it feels like when we no longer know what deserves our attention. On Wednesday, we explored the exhaustion of feeling pulled in every direction. Today, I think we discovered that both of these experiences may be pointing towards something even deeper. Perhaps the greatest loss isn't clarity. Perhaps the greatest loss is presence. Not mindfulness as another practice to perfect, not another item to add to your routine. I'm talking about something much simpler, something much more fundamental. The experience of actually being where your life is. Because if your attention is somewhere else, then in a very real sense, so are you. That realization has been sitting with me all week. Not as an idea, as a question. How much of my life have I actually experienced? Not accomplished, not managed, not survived, experienced. It's an uncomfortable question because many of us have become extraordinarily skilled at preparing for tomorrow. We're always getting ready for the next season, the next project, the next promotion, the next responsibility, the next challenge, the next milestone. There's always another horizon, always another finish line, always another version of ourselves we believe we need to become before we can finally exhale. But what if life isn't waiting for us beyond the next finish line? What if life has been quietly unfolding beneath our feet the entire time? I think about something that has become increasingly clear to me. So much of modern life teaches us to relate to experience transactionally. If I finish this, I can relax. If I solve this problem, then I'll be at peace. If I earn enough, then I will first feel secure. If I become successful enough, then I'll finally enjoy my life. Notice how often joy is postponed. Peace is postponed. Presence is postponed. Life itself becomes postponed. We're always negotiating with the future, always believing that fulfillment is one accomplishment away, one decision away, one more task away. But the future has an interesting habit. When it arrives, it becomes the present. And if we've never learned how to inhabit the present, we simply begin negotiating with the future all over again. The cycle continues, not because we've failed, because we've unknowingly learned to live as though life is something to earn rather than something to experience. Perhaps that's why crossing things off a to-do list feels satisfying for a few moments, and then the satisfaction fades. Another task appears, another responsibility emerges, another decision waits. The list is never finished. It was never designed to be. Life is not a project that can be completed. It is a relationship that can only be lived. And relationships are not strengthened through efficiency. They're strengthened through attention. Think about the people you love most. What do they actually want from you? Not a perfectly organized calendar, not flawless productivity, not constant achievement. More often than not, they simply want your presence, your listening, your curiosity, your laughter, your attention. Perhaps the same is true of your own life. Perhaps your life has not been asking you to become more efficient. Perhaps it's been quietly asking you to come home to this conversation, to this meal, to this walk, to this sunrise, to this breath, to this ordinary Tuesday afternoon that will never happen again. One of the greatest paradoxes I've discovered is that the moments we tend to overlook are often the moments that become the memories we cherish. Not because they were extraordinary, because we were fully there for them. As we close this week's journey, I don't want to leave you with another strategy. I don't want to give you another system. I don't want to give you another habit. I simply want to leave you with a question. Not one to answer immediately, one to live with. If your attention is where your life is experienced, where have you been living? And where would you like to begin living now? Not someday, not after everything is finished, not after you've solved every problem, today. Because perhaps clarity doesn't begin when life becomes less demanding. Perhaps clarity begins the moment your attention comes home. And maybe that's what has mattered all along. If this week's VybeShift Podcast has resonated with you, the conversation continues in this week's Vibrational Stage Podcast. Today we'll explore an even deeper possibility. What if the life you've been trying so hard to manage isn't asking to be managed at all? What if, beneath every role, every expectation, every responsibility, and every identity you've carried, there's a quieter place that has never been lost? We'll explore what it means to stop organizing your life around constant obligation and begin rediscovering the deeper presence from which meaning naturally emerges. Continue the journey. The VybeShift Podcast is about recognizing the hidden patterns that shape our everyday experience. The Vibrational Stage Podcast explores the deeper emotional and existential landscape beneath those patterns, where lasting transformation begins. You can continue the journey by following the link in the show notes. And until next time, remember this. Your life is not waiting for you on the other side of your to-do list. Your life has been quietly unfolding in every moment your attention is willing to meet it.